Late spring in the Montana Territory carried a strange scent, half-thawed earth, half sorrow hanging in the wind. At the edge of Red Fern Trading Post, where wagons creaked and horses lifted restless hooves, a woman stood beside a stack of grain sacks as if trying to disappear into them. Her name was Mavis Calder, 28 years old. Broad-shouldered, soft-bellied, strong as a farm mule, and tired down to the bone. Her husband stood a few feet away, pacing like a man searching for excuses. Clint Calder smelled of stale whiskey and nights spent with regrets he blamed on everyone but himself. He kept tugging at the torn hem of his coat, muttering, kicking dust, looking anywhere but at the woman who had cooked his meals, patched his clothes, and kept his life steady long after he'd stopped deserving it. "You're more weight than wife," Clint spat, flicking his hand as if shooing a fly. "Ain't a man alive wants a woman built like you. I can't feed us both anymore." Mavis kept her chin level, though her throat trembled. "I work harder than 3 men, Clint. You know that. Working ain't worth much if you eat the pantry empty by morning." He shot back, louder now, so the nearby ranch hands could hear. "Maybe if you weren't so much, things be different." Her cheeks burned. Not from shame she'd cried those tears years ago, but from the cruelty of hearing it spoken so openly. Still, she folded her hands over her apron and stayed silent. Clint wasn't finished. "I found a man willing to take you. Give me 6 gold coins for you. That's more'n fair." The world blurred for a moment. 6 coins. Less than the price of a mule. Less than a winter wagon. "You're selling me?" She whispered. He didn't flinch. "To someone who needs muscle for his trail crew, better than you deserve." A shadow moved near the hitching posts. A broad, sunburned man with cracked boots and a weather-worn face strolled forward. A rifle rested casually on his shoulder, and a grin that wasn't kind tugged at his mouth. "Name's Rowan Briggs," he said. "She do. Sturdy enough. Quiet, I hope." Clint tossed a frayed satchel at Mavis's feet. "She follow orders." Rowan stepped close, took her wrist and knotted a rope around it, not painfully, not gently either. "Just till we reach camp," he muttered. Mavis swallowed the rising sting in her throat. No one asked if she wanted this. No one ever did. Clint turned away, already pocketing the coins. Not even glancing back. Something inside her cracked then, not loudly but deeply, like the slow breaking of ice beneath spring thaw. Rowan's wagon carried her for miles until the sky dulled to lavender and the wind cooled enough to sting. He stopped at the edge of a pine grove marked by old wagon ruts and fire pits. "You stay put," he ordered, jumping down. "Need to hunt supper." And then he disappeared into the trees. Mavis sat with her wrist bound loosely to a wagon wheel, listening to the forest breathe around her, the low groan of branches, the hush of distant water, the lonely cry of a night bird. She did not cry. She refused to, but fear crawled its way up her throat all the same. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy, measured, not Rowan. A tall figure stepped from the pines, a man wrapped in a dark coat, hair tied back, face cut with quiet strength. His skin held the deep bronze of someone who lived beneath open sky, and his eyes, in the dim light, glimmered like steady embers. He approached without a word. Mavis stiffened as he crouched, took out a knife, and sliced through the rope at her wrist with one clean motion. She gasped. He stood and held out his hand large. Steady, offering, not claiming. His voice was low, rich and unwavering. "Come with me." Not a command, not a threat. Something else entirely. A choice. For the first time in years, someone had given her one. Mavis reached for his hand, and the world shifted. The man didn't look back to see if Mavis followed. He simply turned and began walking through the pines, as though he trusted she'd made her choice the moment she placed her Hand in his dot, Mavis hesitated only a heartbeat before stepping into the darkened forest after him. The air smelled of sap and damp needles. Moonlight filtered through branches above, faint and soft, casting pale ribbons on the ground. Her legs ached from hours in Rowan's wagon. Her wrist tingled where the rope had rubbed raw, and her heart thundered against her ribs, but the man's calm stride steadied her somehow. He didn't speak, not with words, but something about him, his posture, his measured breaths. The way he avoided snapping twigs as he moved told her he knew this land like a second skin. After a long climb, through sloping hills and scattered boulders, they reached a ridge where the world opened below them. A narrow valley stretched beneath a rising silver moon. A creek wound through the meadow like a long thread of spilled light, and at the far end, tucked between clusters of tall pines, stood a small cabin with smoke lifting peacefully from its chimney. The man stopped at the ridge's edge and nodded toward it. Home, he said simply. Home. The word struck her harder than any blow Clint had ever thrown at her, because she realized suddenly she had none. She'd been dragged along Clint's misfortunes for years, never belonging anywhere, never allowed to rest long enough to leave a mark on the earth. The stranger stepped forward again, and Mavis followed, her breath thick with wonder and fear. As they approached the cabin, faint laughter floated on the breeze, bright, high-pitched, and unmistakably from children. Mavis froze. Children? Here? She hadn't imagined anyone lived in such a remote pocket of wilderness, and certainly not little ones. The man pushed open the cabin door with quiet familiarity and motioned for her to enter. Inside, warm light flickered across wooden walls. Dried herbs hung above the hearth. A long table sat near the window, covered in hand-stitched cloth. The place was simple, but cared for, lived in with tenderness. 5 pairs of eyes peered at her from behind a timber beam, children ages scattered, expressions wary. A boy of about 9 stepped slightly forward, chin lifted with protective defiance. A girl with long dark hair clutched a cloth doll to her chest. Behind them, twin girls with matching curls pressed together, wide-eyed. And near the wall stood a tiny boy with sandy skin and quiet, observant eyes. The tall man stepped beside her. "These are mine," he said. "Found, not born." Mavis blinked. "Yours?" He nodded once, firm but gentle. "Children left behind. Children no one came back for." His gaze softened when it shifted to them, and something in her chest warmed. Whoever this man was, he was no stranger to loss or to loyalty. She cleared her throat softly. "My name's Mavis." The children didn't answer. They watched her as though she were a sudden storm cloud, maybe rain, maybe lightning. The man finally offered his own name. "Elijah Crow," he said. "You can call me Eli." Mavis absorbed that slowly. A man who hardly spoke, yet had carried 5 abandoned children up a mountain and built a home around them. A man who freed strangers instead of binding them. She knew instantly he was cut from a rarer cloth than any she had met. Eli pointed to a small stool near the fire. "You're safe here," he said. "No one will touch you while you heal." Her throat tightened again. She didn't even realize she needed to hear such words until he spoke them. She sank onto the stool, her body sinking with exhaustion. The warmth from the hearth seeped into her bones, unraveling knots she'd held for years. The children slowly crept closer, drawn by curiosity. The smallest one, barefoot and sleepy-eyed, tugged gently on her sleeve. "You're big," he whispered with innocent awe. For a moment, Mavis tensed, bracing for mockery, but the boy continued softly. "Big enough to reach the sky." Her breath caught. Her eyes burned. Eli watched from the corner of the room, arms folded, expression unreadable, but his jaws softened. Just slightly. It had been a long time since anyone spoke of her size without judgment. Longer still since anyone saw it as a blessing rather than a burden. Mavis wiped her eyes carefully. "Thank you, little one," she whispered. I never had anyone say that before." The boy smiled a shy, tooth-gap grin and nestled against her arm. Something in her cracked open then. "Not in pain, but in possibility." Eli nodded toward the loft stairs. "They've been waiting a long time for someone like you." She looked at him, startled. "Someone like me?" His voice was quiet, but weighted with truth. "Someone who stays." That first night in Elijah Crow's cabin felt unreal to Mavis, like stepping into a story too gentle to trust. She sat by the fire, hands folded, trying not to take up too much space. Though the children clustered around her like she was a chimney giving off warmth. Eli moved with silent efficiency, pulling down blankets, checking the windows, banking the fire for the night. He didn't hover and didn't question her, but he noticed her every flinch, every exhaustion-slumped shoulder, every time she shifted as though preparing to defend herself. He'd seen hurt before on small faces, in frightened eyes. He recognized its quiet in her. "Hungry?" he asked after a long moment. Mavis shook her head out of habit, though her stomach gnawed painfully. Eli reached for a small pot sitting near the fire, lifted the lid, and ladled thick stew into a tin bowl. "Eat," he said softly. "You need strength." His voice held no judgment, only certainty. Mavis hesitated, then accepted the bowl. The first spoonful nearly undid her. It wasn't special, just rabbit, potatoes, herbs, but no one had cooked for her in years. Food had been something Clint lorded, measured, criticized. Now it was offered freely, without strings or shame. The children watched her eat as if measuring her place among them. The oldest boy, Liam, finally stepped forward. "Eli says you came from the trading post," he said, chin raised. "Were you hurt? Did someone chase you?" Mavis lowered her spoon, choosing her words carefully. "I wasn't wanted anymore." The boy frowned. "People don't just get thrown away." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her heart ached with the truth she couldn't bring herself to speak. The smallest child, Sam, she'd heard Eli call him, climbed onto the stool beside her. "Bad folks throw good things away," he said. "L.A. says it's 'cause they can't see right." Mavis swallowed hard. "Your Eli sounds mighty wise." Sam nodded. "He saved us all." Mavis glanced toward Eli, who was patching a tear in one of the quilts with careful stitches. A man that quiet, she realized, didn't brag about kindness. He lived it, breathed it, let his actions speak. "How long have the children been with you?" she asked. Eli didn't look up. "Each came at different times. Storms bring them, or riders leaving them. Sometimes both." He tied off the thread and set the quilt aside. "But they're safe now." The cabin creaked softly in agreement, as if the wood itself held the memory of every child who'd stepped through the door. Mavis finished her stew and set the bowl aside. The fire crackled, casting a gentle glow across the rough-hewn walls. Sleep tugged at her eyes, but fear kept her upright. Eli noticed. "You can rest here," he said, gesturing to a cot near the hearth. "I'll stay watch." "You don't have to," she murmured. His expression barely shifted, but his voice softened. "I know." Mavis lay down cautiously, expecting the straw mattress to scratch, the wool blanket to itch. Instead, the cot was soft and smelled faintly of lavender and pine smoke. When she pulled the blanket up, warmth seeped through her like a balm. The children settled into the loft above, whispering, giggling, then growing quiet one by one. Their presence felt like small lanterns, flickering and comforting. Eli sat on the floor near the door, back against the wall, hat resting beside him. He looked like a guardian carved from stone, unmoving, unbothered, patient. "Why did you help me?" she whispered into the dimness. He didn't turn his head. "No one deserves chains." They weren't tight, she said weakly, as though defending her captor out of habit. They were still chains, he replied. A long silence settled. Mavis stared at the beams above her, listening to the children's soft breathing. I'm not used to kindness, she whispered. Eli's voice was almost too quiet to hear. Folks like you don't get enough of it. Folks like me? People with big hearts, he said simply. People who've been carrying too much for too long. Her throat tightened. No one had ever seen her like that, not through pity or disdain, but truth. Sleep, he murmured. Morning comes early here. And for the first time in years, with the steady rhythm of children dreaming overhead and a silent protector at the door, Mavis let herself drift. She slept without fear, and when dawn crept through the window, gilding her face in soft gold, the first thought in her waking mind wasn't sorrow or dread. It was wonder. Maybe. She thought, this place could hold me. Maybe this home had been waiting for a woman like me all along. Morning in the mountains came gently soft light filtering through pine boughs, the scent of wood smoke curling through the cracks in the cabin walls. When Mavis woke, it took a moment to remember where she was. Not Clint's shack, not Rowan's wagon, but a warm quilts and firelight cabin tucked against a ridge, with 5 children still snoring above her like a nest of sleepy birds. For the first time in years, she hadn't woken to someone shouting her name, demanding something, criticizing her weight or her worth. Instead, she woke to birdsong and the quiet crackle of embers. Her heart ached with softness she wasn't ready for. Eli was already outside, splitting wood with slow, methodical movements. Each swing was controlled, steady, never rushed, never wasteful. A man who understood rhythm and labor, not cruelty. Mavis stepped to the doorway, rubbing her arms against the morning chill. You always work this early? Eli didn't pause. Work keeps the home warm. She nodded. I can help, if you'd like. He studied her for a moment, eyes unreadable but not unkind. You need rest. Rest. The word felt foreign, like a luxury she hadn't earned. I've been resting my whole life in the wrong places, she said softly. Let me help where it matters. Something in Eli's jaw shifted, not irritation, but respect. He handed her a smaller piece of wood. Stack them in neat piles. Not too high, so the littles don't knock it over. Mavis smiled. I can do that. She arranged the chopped logs while Eli continued to swing the axe, their silence companionable. Occasionally, she caught the children peeking through the window or slipping barefoot into the yard to gather pine cones. Pretending they weren't watching her. After breakfast simple, corn cakes and honey, Mavis tried to help with chores inside the cabin. She found a bin of flour tucked beneath the counter and a jug of buttermilk on the shelf. Her hands acted on instinct, measuring, mixing, kneading. Cooking was the only place her body had ever felt useful, necessary. Love. The children drifted toward her, drawn by the smell of rising dough. Rosie, the girl with long dark braids, hovered closest. What are you making? She whispered, voice barely more than a breath. Bread, Mavis replied. My mama's recipe. Sweet at the heart. Rosie's eyes glowed. Like you? Mavis blinked hard. The question punched straight into her chest. I don't know about that, she murmured, but Rosie nodded with conviction. It's true. Eli says sweet things grow best in wild places. Mavis didn't know how to answer that, so she focused on shaping the dough. When she finally placed the pan in the fire oven, her hand shook not from fear, but from the weight of being seen in a way she'd forgotten how to accept. When the bread emerged, golden at the edges and warm enough to steam in the cold air, she set it on the table with a shy smile. It's not perfect, she warned, but it's hot. The children gathered around like birds discovering a feast. They each tore a small piece, sniffing cautious at first. Liam gave a firm nod. Rosie closed her eyes like she was tasting a memory. The twins hummed with delight. Sam pressed both hands to his cheeks and let out a squeaky sound that made Mavis laugh. Then Rosie whispered something in a language Mavis didn't know. Soft, melodic, reverent. Eli, who had been leaning against the doorframe, translated quietly. "She says you smell like home." Mavis gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. No one had ever said such a thing about her. She had never been anyone's home. "Is that good?" she asked, voice trembling. Eli's gaze held hers. "It's the best thing a child can say." The warmth in her chest rose like sunlight, unsteady and beautiful. That afternoon, Eli brought out a weathered leather notebook filled with names, one for each child, written under a date and a place they were found. No last names, no origins, only the beginnings of their new lives. They didn't choose their start, Eli said, but they get to choose what comes next. He paused, eyes settling on her. "So do you." Mavis brushed her fingers over the pages, careful as if touching sacred scripture. "What if I don't know what comes next?" Eli closed the book gently. "Then stay," he said. "Stay until you figure it out." His voice wasn't a request. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. A door she'd never known she was allowed to open. Children watched with hope shining in their eyes, and Mavis tired. Unwanted, discarded. Mavis felt something inside her whisper, "Maybe this is where your story begins." Mavis didn't decide to stay with words. She decided by waking up the next morning and tying on an apron before Eli finished stirring the fire. She decided by brushing Rosie's braids, by helping Sam wash his face in the cold basin by the door, by steadying the ladder as Liam climbed to patch a loose shingle. She decided by doing the quiet things only a woman who cared would do. Days passed that way, soft, purposeful, stitched together with new rhythms she didn't realize she needed. The children settled into her presence with the ease of saplings leaning toward sunlight. They didn't cling or crowd, but they orbited her naturally, one tugging at her skirt hem, another slipping small fingers into her palm, another asking for a story before bed. Their affection grew slow but steady, like trust coming out of hiding. One morning, Mavis swept the cabin floor while Eli sharpened his hunting knife at the table. The simple scrape of steel against stone filled the room like a heartbeat. "You work too hard," he said without lifting his gaze. Mavis snorted softly. "I barely scratched the surface of what needs doing. You don't have to earn your place here." She paused, the broom freezing mid-sweep. Eli finally looked up. His eyes were steady, warm in their quiet way. "You're not a guest we're waiting to dismiss. You're not a burden. You don't owe us work." Her throat tightened. "I've never been anywhere someone didn't expect something from me." He nodded once. "Then it's time someone expected nothing." She stared at the broom bristles, blinking back a sting of tears. "Doing things makes me feel worth something." "You're worth something even when your hands are empty," he said. The word struck her so deeply she had to sit down. Rosie patted down the loft ladder just then and climbed into her lap as if she sensed the moment. She curled against Mavis's chest with the content side. Eli watched quietly. Knife forgotten. It was the children who truly made Mavis believe she belonged. Each evening, Mavis told stories, ones her mother whispered to her before life turned cruel and hard. Tales of brave women, clever foxes, winter moons that could grant wishes if you sang to them softly. The children listened wide-eyed, faces glowing in the firest. One night, Sam tugged at her sleeve. "Mavis?" "Yes, sweetheart? Will you stay forever?" The room went utterly still. The twins held their breath. Liam's head snapped up. Rosie curled closer as if anchoring herself. Mavis's heart ached with a sweetness sharp as pain. Before she could answer, Eli spoke from the hearth where he was mending a boot. "Forever is a long time, Sam," he said gently, "but she can Sam insisted, eyes big and hopeful. She fits here? Mavis looked at Eli, unsure, seeking something permission. Acceptance? Safety? He met her gaze with a steady warmth she had never seen directed at her. If she wishes, he said softly, she fits. The cabin seemed to breathe with the weight of that truth. Mavis placed her hand on Sam's cheek. I don't know what forever looks like yet, she whispered. But I'm here now. And I want to be here. Sam's little face lit like sunrise. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Mavis stepped outside for air. The sky above was a deep velvet blue, scattered with stars brighter than any she'd ever seen. The creek murmured below. The wind carried the scent of pine and the faint sweetness of early wildflowers. She wrapped her arms around herself. Eli joined her quietly. He didn't speak, didn't invade her space, just stood nearby, a grounding presence. Sometimes, she said softly, I feel like I'm dreaming. Like any moment, someone's going to shake me awake and tell me I'm foolish for believing I deserved something good. Eli's voice was low. You deserved good long before it found you. She looked at him, startled. Why are you so kind to me? He breathed out slowly, watching the stars. Because I know what it's like to be left behind. To be treated like you're worth less than hope. She swallowed hard. You were left too? Most of us are, in one way or another, he murmured. Some get left by people. Some by fate. Some by the world. He turned his gaze toward her, and some get found again. Mavis felt her breath catch. The wind brushed her hair, lifting strands gently, as if the mountains themselves were listening. Did I get found, Eli? She asked. He didn't reach for her. He didn't step closer. But his voice held something tender enough to shake her. You got found, he said. And you're safe. A single tear slipped down her cheek, quiet, grateful. For the first time in years, she believed it. Spring softened into early summer, and the mountains around Ash Ridge bloomed with wild columbines and tiny yellow buttercups. Days melted into a rhythm Mavis had never known, one built on gentle routines instead of fear. She rose with the sun, cooked breakfast with little hands helping, washed clothes in the creek while the twins splashed nearby, and listened to Rosie read from a worn picture book Eli had found months before. Work felt lighter here. Laughter came easier. Eli, for his part, moved through each day like a steady river, quiet but strong. He taught Liam to carve fishing hooks from bone, showed Rosie how to track deer prints, lifted Sam to pick berries when he couldn't reach. And without ever saying it aloud, he let Mavis stand beside him in every task, as if she'd always belonged there, but peace is fragile. And sometimes the world remembers you even when you try to forget it. One afternoon, the sky darkened quicker than it should have. Clouds rolled in thick and bruised. Mavis hurried to pull quilts from the line while Eli reinforced the shutters. Storm'll be rough, Eli said, glancing at the treetops bending in warning. Wind's wrong. The children scampered inside, arms full of pine cones and little treasures they didn't want to lose to the storm. Mavis ushered them into the cabin, her heart thudding with that strange blend of concern and instinct she hadn't felt since she was a girl. But even as lightning flickered in the clouds, thunder rumbling like distant drums, it wasn't the storm that made unease crawl under her skin. It was the sound of hooves. Slow, heavy, too deliberate for a traveler seeking shelter. Eli heard it too. His posture straightened, his hand drifting toward the rifle resting near the door. The children went silent all at once, like a flock of birds sensing a predator. The rider came into view through the sheets of rain. Broad shoulders, rough coat, a familiar slouch. Mavis's stomach twisted painfully. Clint. His horse staggered in the mud, breath steaming. Clint twisted in the saddle, trying to shield his face from the rain. But she'd know that bent posture anywhere. The bitterness in it. The weight of someone who'd made cruelty a habit. Mavis felt her breath freeze in her chest. Eli's voice was low and steady. You know him. It wasn't a question. Yes, she whispered. I do. Eli nodded once, subtle and protective. Then he stepped outside. He didn't slam the door. Didn't posture. Just moved with the calm certainty of a man who'd defend what mattered. Clint reined his horse to a stop. You, Elijah. Crow? Eli stayed a few paces back enough distance to show caution, not fear. I am. Clint wiped water from his brow. I heard you took my wife. Inside the cabin, Mavis flinched. Eli's expression didn't change. No one here belongs to you. She's my property, Clint snapped. I paid for that woman in sweat and years, and I damn well want her back. That man Briggs Rowan, he said you stole her after he bought her from me. Mavis's breath hitched. Bought. Hearing it again felt like being struck. Eli's voice dropped lower. A woman is not something to buy. Clint scowled, leaning forward in the saddle. You don't know her. She eats like a horse. She's slow. She cries easy. Ain't good for nothing, but Eli stepped closer, and Clint faltered mid-sentence. Not because Eli raised a weapon, but because Eli's calm held the weight of a mountain. Choose your next words carefully, Eli warned. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating Clint's startled expression. She belongs with me, Clint muttered, voice weaker now. No, Eli said quietly. She never did. Inside the cabin, Mavis trembled so hard the stool beneath her creaked. The children hovered around her, Sam clutching her sleeve, Rosie holding her hand, Liam standing guard near the window. Do you want to go back? Rosie whispered gently. Mavis shook her head so fast her braid bounced. Liam nodded, jaw set. Then you won't. Mavis felt something inside her, the thing Clint had crushed over years of cruelty, start to rise. Something strong, something alive. She stood. Rain battered the roof. Thunder rolled, and she stepped outside. Eli glanced back when he heard her footsteps. His eyes softened in a way only she ever saw. Clint's expression twisted. There you are. Come on, woman. Don't make this messier than it needs to be. Mavis's hands shook, but her voice when it came was iron wrapped in fire. I'm not going anywhere with you. Clint gaped. You ungrateful. I'm not yours, she said louder, stronger. Not your mule, not your shadow, not your burden. I'm done being small for you. Eli didn't touch her. Didn't step between them. He simply stood beside her, solid, unwavering, like a wall she could lean on but didn't have to. The rain poured harder. Clint looked between them, fury and disbelief choking him. You're choosing him? Choosing this life? Mavis lifted her chin, tears mixing with rain. I'm choosing me. Thunder shook the mountains. Clint stared at her, stunned. And for the first time in her life, Mavis realized she wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not even a little. Clint stared at Mavis as if he didn't recognize her. This woman standing tall in the storm, shoulders squared, eyes blazing. She wasn't the same quiet, shrinking figure he'd dragged through years of misery. She had a spine now, a home behind her, and people who wanted her truly wanted her. Mavis, Clint hissed, rain dripping down his beard. You don't get to talk to me like that. I do now, she said, voice steady. And I should have said it a long time ago. Clint stomped forward, mud splashing around his boots. Eli's hand moved slightly toward his holster, not threatening. Just ready, but Mavis lifted a hand. It's fine, she whispered to Eli, but he didn't move away. He stood at her shoulder, a silent promise carved in living flesh. Clint pointed a finger at her chest. You're my wife. You don't just walk off into the mountains with some stranger. I didn't walk off, she said. You sold me. He flinched, a shadow crossing his face. It was a mistake. I was drunk, angry. You were always angry, she whispered. Always looking for someone to blame. That's not fair. He snapped. It's the truest thing I've ever said. The rain hammered harder, slanting sideways with the wind. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the earth beneath their feet. The world around them felt like it was holding its breath. The children peeked through the window, small faces pale with fear. Clint followed her gaze, then barked out a bitter laugh. So this is what you want? Playing mama to some wild man's brood of strays? Mavis stiffened, but Eli didn't flinch, not even at the insult. This isn't playing, she said. This is living. This is love. Love? Clint spat. He ain't your man. Before she could answer, Eli spoke, voice low but carrying through the storm. She can decide that for herself. Clint snarled. And you think you deserve her? A woman like that? She's too much work for most men. Eli didn't blink. I'm not most men. Mavis's breath hitched. Clint scoffed. You don't know her. She eats too much. She talks too slow. Stop. Mavis's voice cracked like a whip. Clint froze. Stunned, she stepped closer, rain pouring down her face. Her dress clinging to her curves in a way that made her look carved from something strong. You don't get to talk about my body ever again, she said. You don't get to shame me. You don't get to decide what I am. Mavis, I am not too much. I'm not too big. I'm not too loud or too soft or too anything. I am exactly enough for the right people. She pointed toward the cabin. Those children think I hung the moon. And maybe I didn't, but they believe I could. She looked at Eli, and he sees me. Really sees me. Eli didn't move or smile or reach for her. But something in his expression softened in a way that warmed her through the cold rain. Clint's face twisted. So you're choosing them? Over me? I'm choosing myself, she said again. And it leads me here. Thunder boomed. Clint stared at her, breath shaking. You'll regret this. No, she said gently. I regret staying with you as long as I did. Eli finally stepped forward, not threatening, not aggressive, just firm. You've got no business here, he told Clint. Go back the way you came. And don't return. Clint looked between them, realization dawning he'd lost. Not because Eli was bigger or stronger, but because Mavis was finally free. You'll be sorry, Clint muttered. You'll see how hard life gets when you're not wanted. Mavis exhaled, soft and sad. I am wanted. That broke something in Clint. His shoulders sagged. He turned his horse without another word. The storm swallowed him. Mavis didn't move until his silhouette faded into the gray curtain of rain. She trembled not in fear, but in the release of years of chained-down pain. Eli stepped beside her, not touching, but close enough for her to feel the heat of his presence through the cold. You all right? He asked quietly. Her breath came shaky. I think so. You were brave. She shook her head. I was tired. Tired of being quiet. Brave, he repeated, and hearing it from him steady. Honest Elijah Crow made something inside her finally break open. The tears came suddenly. Hot even in the cold rain. Eli didn't pull her into his arms. He opened them. Choice. Not a claim. Mavis stepped forward. And for the first time in her life, someone held her like she wasn't too heavy, too much. Too anything. Just right. Just Mavis. Just enough. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean. Mist rose from the river, curling through the trees like smoke from a forgotten fire. Mavis stood at the edge of the porch, dripping wet, staring at the soft light creeping over the hills. For the first time in her life, she felt calm. Not safe because the world still had its dangers, but calm. As if she had finally stepped onto solid ground after years of being swept away by someone else's currents. Eli joined her, carrying a tin cup of steaming coffee. He didn't speak at first, just handed it to her. Their hands brushed lightly, a spark that didn't startle them. "You rested?" he asked quietly. She nodded, taking a careful sip. The warmth spread through her chest and her fingers, as if the coffee itself was a small kind of miracle. "I slept," she admitted. "Finally, without worrying someone would come back for me." Eli's gaze softened. "You've earned that. More than anyone I've ever known." The children stirred inside, their laughter and whispers spilling out through the open door. They had taken to Mavis as if she were part of their world for years rather than days. Their trust was effortless, unguarded, the kind of love she had never been able to let herself receive before. Mavis set the cup down on the porch railing and looked out at the land before her. The cabin, the river, the small garden they'd started, everything was raw and new, but alive. It was theirs. Their safety, their work, their life together, unbroken by the shadows of the past. "I never thought I'd have this," she murmured. "You deserve it," Eli said simply. "And you fought for it." A small smile crept onto her face. For the first time, she believed it. She had fought. She had chosen herself. And in that choice, she had found others who would walk beside her. Not in front or behind. The morning sun touched the treetops, glinting off the river. Mavis inhaled, filling her lungs with the crisp, wet scent of earth and rain. She felt the pulse of life around her, alive and insistent. She knew there would be struggles ahead, life always had them, but something about this place made them seem manageable. Smaller somehow. Later, she and Eli moved together in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring pots. The children helped, laughter ringing through the small cabin. For once, the kitchen didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home. "I never learned how to cook properly," Mavis admitted as she fumbled with a knife. Eli laughed, a deep, rich sound. "No one does at first. But you're doing fine." "I think it's the practice that counts," she said, glancing at him with a playful smirk. "And maybe the company." He gave her a look that made her heart flutter, warmth, steadiness, and a quiet admiration. No expectations, no claims, just presence. And for her, that was enough. The children ran outside as the sun climbed higher, chasing the small stream that fed the river. Mavis watched them, imagining a future filled with these ordinary, magical moments. Moments of laughter, of muddy hands, of shared meals, of quiet evenings by the fire. Moments that didn't depend on fear or control. Eli came up behind her, wrapping a hand around her waist. She leaned back against him, closing her eyes for a moment. "I never knew I could feel this." "Safe," she said. "You've always had it in you," he whispered. "You just needed to let the world see it." And she had. Hours later, as the sun dipped low in the sky, they all gathered by the river. Eli held a fishing rod, Mavis handed worms to the children, and laughter carried across the water. Every so often, Mavis would catch Eli's eye. And in that quiet glance, she felt something that words couldn't capture. Respect, care, love. Kind of promise built from trust rather than fear. When the first stars appeared, Mavis wrapped a blanket around herself and leaned against Eli. "I used to think life was something that happened to me," she whispered. "And now? Now I see it's something I can shape. Something I can choose." Eli nodded. "And you've chosen beautifully." The river whispered against the banks. The fireflies blinked to life. And for the first time, Mavis felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders entirely. Here, in the quiet hum of a new life, she had found her place. She had found her home. And as the night embraced them, laughter and gentle chatter filling the air, Mavis knew one thing clearly. Happiness wasn't a fleeting visitor anymore. It was something she could hold on to, something she could build, something and someone to last a lifetime. The morning sun barely pierced the mist that clung to the hills, and yet, Inside the cabin, life was stirring with quiet energy. Mavis awoke to the sound of the children's laughter outside, their tiny feet pounding against the soft earth, chasing the inevitable stream of autumn leaves. She stretched, savoring the rare peace she had grown so accustomed to, yet knew it could be fragile. Eli was already up, tending the fire, his movements calm and methodical. When he saw her, he smiled, not the fleeting smile of polite habit, but the steady, warm one that made her feel anchored even in stormy moments. "Good morning," he said, his voice a low rumble that made her chest feel lighter. "Morning," she replied, her lips curving into a genuine smile. They didn't speak much as the morning unfolded, each absorbed in the simple rhythm of their lives. The children scurried about, helping with small chores, their laughter blending seamlessly with the rustle of leaves and the distant gurgle of the river. For a moment, it all felt like a fragile dream, too perfect, too delicate to last. And perhaps, Mavis thought, that was the point. Happiness always felt that way to her, like a delicate vase balanced on a narrow shelf, easily shattered by a careless hand. Later that afternoon, as they worked in the garden, a figure appeared at the edge of the property, a man, tall and hesitant, brushing mud from his boots. Mavis froze, heart pounding. She had learned caution, vigilance, a lifetime of reading intentions in a glance. The man approached slowly, hands raised slightly in peace. I'm sorry to intrude," he said. "My name is Harold. I used to know your father." Mavis felt a cold flicker of fear. Memories of a childhood filled with unpredictability, of fathers she had barely known, washed over her. Yet something in the man's posture, open, careful, unthreatening, made her hesitate before retreating. Eli stepped forward, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "We're listening," he said quietly. Harold swallowed nervously. "Your father, he wanted to make amends. He left something for you. Something he never had the courage to give while he was alive." Mavis blinked, the air seeming to thicken around her. The past she had carefully avoided now pressed against her, but not with malice. With a quiet plea for recognition, perhaps even forgiveness, Eli squeezed her shoulder gently. "You can do this," he whispered, taking a deep breath. Mavis followed Harold to a small leather satchel he carried. Inside were letters, worn and yellowed with age, along with a delicate chain holding a small locket. Mavis ran her fingers over it, the metal warm despite its age. The letters spoke of regret, love, and hope, things Mavis had long thought unreachable. Her father had written about her, about the person she was becoming, and about a wish for her happiness, however distant it might have seemed to him in life. Tears blurred her vision as she read each carefully chosen word, each sentence a thread attempting to mend years of absence. Eli stood silently behind her, allowing the moment to unfold. He had seen the pain she carried, but he also knew her strength, and he refused to let her face this alone. When she finally looked up, her eyes glistening, Mavis found both sorrow and acceptance in her expression. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything," Harold replied softly. "Just know he loved you in the way he could." Mavis closed the locket in her hand, holding it close to her heart. The weight of the past had shifted, still present, but no longer a chain that bound her. She felt lighter, braver. Later, that evening, she sat on the porch with Eli, the locket around her neck and the letters stacked neatly on the table beside her. The children were asleep and the world outside was quiet, save for the whisper of the river. "I never thought I'd feel this." "Whole," she said, voice barely more than a whisper. "You are," Eli replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've earned it. You've built it." Mavis rested her head against his shoulder, allowing herself to believe it fully for the first time. They had faced storms, both literal and metaphorical, and emerged not just surviving, but stronger, together. and as the night stretched on, a sense of serenity settled over the cabin. She realized that trust, like love, wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing again and again, even when fear lingered. And in this quiet moment, she knew she had chosen wisely. The past had been acknowledged. The future was theirs, and happiness, real, lasting happiness, was no longer a fleeting dream. The morning broke in a cascade of gold, sunlight spilling over the hills like a promise. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant hum of life awakening. Mavis stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and for the first time in years, her chest was light, unburdened. She breathed deeply, letting the moment anchor her. Eli emerged from the cabin, carrying a small basket of freshly picked apples. He paused when he saw her, his eyes reflecting the same quiet joy she felt inside. There was no need for words. This morning itself spoke volumes. "Good morning," she said softly, smiling. "Good morning," he replied, placing the basket on the porch. "Are you ready for today?" Mavis tilted her head, curiosity mingling with excitement. "Ready for?" He gestured to the clearing beyond the cabin where friends and neighbors had begun to gather. Tables were set with food, laughter spilling into the morning air, children running with balloons and ribbons tied to their wrists. It was a celebration, not just of harvest, but of life, love, and the family they had built together. Mavis's eyes shimmered. This was the moment she had dreamed of, not of grand wealth or fame, but of belonging, of shared joy. For the first time, she fully understood what it meant to be home. Her children ran to her, little arms wrapping around her legs, their laughter infecting everyone nearby. Eli joined them, sweeping the youngest into his arms, spinning him until the boy shrieked with delight as the morning sun climbed higher. Mavis found herself at the heart of the gathering, surrounded by warmth and friendship. Harold, who had delivered her father's letters, stood quietly to the side, observing with a soft smile. She approached him, the locket still around her neck. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "For bringing him back to me, even if only in words." Harold nodded. "He wanted you to know love doesn't end, even if life does. You carried that love in you all along." Mavis held the locket tightly and turned to Eli, who had been watching her with gentle anticipation. "I'm ready," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Ready for what?" he asked, pretending not to know, though the warmth in his eyes betrayed him. "To live fully," she replied, taking his hand. "To love, to trust, to dream." They walked through the crowd together, hand in hand, and Mavis realized how far they had come. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, every tear had led them here, standing in the light of a new day. Stronger together than they had ever been apart. The children ran ahead, and the adults joined in, laughter and music blending into the perfect harmony of community. Someone struck a chord on a guitar, another began a gentle tune on the piano, and soon the clearing was filled with music that mirrored their hearts' as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Mavis found herself leaning against Eli, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She realized that happiness wasn't a fleeting moment, it was the culmination of choices, courage, and unwavering faith in love. Eli kissed her forehead softly. "Whatever comes next," he murmured, "we face it together." "Yes," she whispered, "together." The evening grew calm, the children now exhausted but happy, and the fire pit crackled as stars began to pierce the indigo sky. Mavis watched the flames dance, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. She thought of the fear she had once carried, the loneliness that had seemed endless, and the darkness that had threatened to consume hope itself. But now, surrounded by love, laughter, and the people who mattered most, she knew something extraordinary. The past no longer defined her. Every moment, Every heartbreak and every triumph had led to this luminous present. And in that present, there was no room for regret. Only gratitude. Eli pulled her close, and for the first time, Mavis allowed herself to fully believe in the magic of ordinary life, the beauty of a home filled with love, the strength found in family, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Under the vast, star-strewn sky, Mavis felt her heart swell with pure joy. She realized that happiness wasn't a destination, but a choice, one that she had made, one that she would continue to make. Every single day. And as the night embraced them, the laughter of children echoing softly through the trees, Mavis whispered to Eli, This is everything." Eli smiled, holding her hand tightly. Everything and more. And in that quiet, magical moment, with the firelight flickering and the stars shining above, the story of their journey of love, resilience, and hope found its perfect ending. A new dawn had begun, and it was theirs to cherish forever.